So we will record today's session, and also please save any questions for the end. You are welcome to type questions into the chat throughout, and then I will read them out, or Emily will read them out at the very end. Just a quick note on things that are coming up at the KIA. So this upcoming Saturday, we will open a new exhibition in the interactive gallery. It is called It's a David Small World. And if you are familiar with David Small and Sarah Stewart, they are a local team, author and illustrator. And we will be displaying some of David Small's original illustrations for several of his books on the walls, as well as having some upcoming events with David and Sarah in person, including the September Art Detectives, which will be our first Art Detectives in the building since 2020. That is September 11th, and David and Sarah will be reading the book out loud. Our next Art Break is also our first in-person Art Break since 2020. That is September 7th, and that is with Chris Dilley and Ben Brown of the People's Food Co-op here in town on local sustainability in connection with the upcoming exhibition, Jenny Ruffner, Reforestation of the Imagination. Our first book discussion back since the summer break is September 15th, and the book is called The Whole Picture, The Colonial Story of the Art in Our Museums and Why We Need to Talk About It. And you can contact our librarian for more information. And if you are a member of the KIA, September 16th is our Thursday evening, September 16th, whether you're a member or not, you can join us to hear from Jenny Ruffner on Zoom before her opening of Jenny Ruffner, Reforestation of the Imagination. There will be a special members opening, I believe that Friday, and then it will be open to all that Saturday, which should be September 17th. So there's a lot coming up at the KIA, especially in the fall, especially as we are moving back towards being in person, but we are always thinking about the safety of our community. So please be aware that if you do come in, we are now once again asking that all of our visitors, regardless of vaccination status, wear a mask. And without further ado, I'm going to turn everything over to Emily, and thank you so much for your time and welcome.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And gotta love how the box for this, oops, no, present is what I want. Oh my goodness. Maybe I should have practiced, Jessica. Why am I having an issue? Let me just start that all over again. Sorry, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Share that. What is going on here? I've never had this happen before. Of course, it's happening right now.
I don't know if this would make a difference, but maybe if you closed out on the bottom. Oh,
just reloaded it. It's good. Thanks, Jessica.
Okay.
All right, there we go. So I'm going to start off here. Just talking about myself for a moment. I mean, I'm kind of talking about myself the whole time, I guess, but I wanted to share today kind of how I have grown as an artist and where being an artist has taken me throughout my career, and also take a look at like kind of the many hats that I've had to wear as an artist. I think a lot of the time that people think, oh, you're an artist, so you make art. And there's just so much more to it than that, and so many avenues that you can take. And really, in order to have a successful career as an artist, you kind of need to be able to adapt to many different things, which has clearly been very beneficial in the last year that I've been able to adapt to different things. But I wanted to kind of start off talking about my work that I started with when I was in college. I've always worked in both metal and fiber in some way. I come from a family of makers, even if it was just dabbling on the side. My mother's a nurse, and she was always doing something with her hands, typically cross stitching or quilting. Um, but it was always something. And even if she was in front of the TV, it's like she had to have something going on. And then my dad is a woodworker, and his dad also was. And then my mom's dad was also kind of a tinkerer in a lot of things. So I kind of grew up with that a lot. And so it just never occurred to me that going to art school was a weird thing, maybe. And I had a really solid math and science background. So that's always kind of been a thread that's continued through my work in some way. So I'm kind of one of those unusual people that's very equal-minded between arts and sciences, and the left and right brain. So I did some work in college where I just kind of became obsessive about felting things, and I learned how to felt in college, but then I started to kind of take a look at how that could go into the natural environments, or mimicking nature in those different ways. This piece I have felted over walnuts and kind of like cut open certain areas and beaded them and done some really unusual things with them. And then sort of taken something that was kind of a cast off. So these are actually placed on a large rusted piece of metal that was probably the bottom of a barrel. And just kind of bringing those elements together in some unusual way. And I mean, some of these nuts, even like the walnut here, you can tell that a squirrel has chewed into it. I collected these from around campus at my college, and then was like felting in these little areas of them. I also was mimicking nature at that point, and was creating these large felted geodes that I was sort of obsessively beading inside of to encrust those insides to make them look like actual geodes. This piece is something that I will revisit in a little while when I get further in the presentation, but it was one of the first pieces that I really had any kind of success with. I won a couple of awards between a college exhibition, and then there was always an exhibition called Michigan Small Colleges, where all the colleges in our conference would have an art exhibition together, which was kind of fun because, normally in your conference, you only really come together for sports and things like that. So it was really nice to have the opportunity to kind of have a competition, in a sense, with the other colleges in our conference that was an art competition, and to be able to see the talent coming from all of those places. After I graduated, I submitted this to a book, and it was actually published in 500 Felted Objects. So that was kind of a really cool accomplishment after I graduated. I continued to work in that, in those materials of the beads and the felting, and I created this piece, which I called Rich in Antioxidants. It's a pomegranate. And at the time I was working at a convenience store, because when you have an art degree, there's not a lot of work out there to just jump into, especially when you don't have any real experience outside of just you've been to college. So I was working at a liquor store at the time, and it was really when energy drinks started getting really crazy. And I just was really amused by the fact that these people would be coming in to buy these energy drinks, and they would say, full of antioxidants and all of these things. And it's like, why don't you just eat the piece of fruit? It's much better for you, kind of thing. So that's kind of where this piece came from. And I had this in an exhibition after I graduated. So, I was taught in college, you participate in exhibitions and you submit to shows, and I wasn't really taught any other avenue to pursue other than you build your exhibition resume and you go to grad school, which I still have not managed to do, but I've still managed to have a really rich career in the arts without doing that. So I also had the chance to, after I graduated that summer, to go to Penland School of Craft in North Carolina. I took a 2-week intensive workshop on box making with an artist named Cappy Cunard, who is just amazing and does really, really incredible work. And of course, fiber crept into these pieces as well. This is a pin box that I made that, has a little felted pin cushion in the top and vintage buttons and things like that all incorporated in it. And these sort of things have really continued to inform my work throughout as well. The opportunity to study with all of these artists in a very intensive environment like that was incredible, especially after graduating from school, and being in that environment for so long. So shortly thereafter, I was trying to start to do art fairs because they seemed a little bit more accessible than exhibitions at the time. I didn't really have a studio for a while. I was living with my parents for a little bit, but pretty quickly after I graduated, my now husband and I purchased a home, and I was able to start to find opportunities in the area. And one of those opportunities was the Art Center of Battle Creek, which I had remembered going into all the time when I was a kid. Like we would do field trips from school and go in there and see the exhibitions and take classes downstairs. And I'd actually taken a ceramic class there when I was in high school. I was probably the youngest person in the class and always felt a little out of my element, but it was really nice to be in that creative environment and do that, and then to have that come full circle and be able to teach there. So I was able to start teaching jewelry and metalsmithing there, as well as sharing my love of felting there. So these are some of my first students that I ever had, that we made some felted hats in these classes. And shortly after that, still missing the classroom and missing being around that community of artists, I actually, when I was in college, I had seen that the Kalamazoo Institute of Art existed, and I had requested a catalog and everything. So here I am just moping around my house, and I don't really have a studio set up, and I definitely can't make jewelry at home really. And I see that there's a spinning class, and I've had all this experience with fiber, and I've been trying to find wool to felt with, which it's crazy to think that I couldn't find wool to felt with at the time. But the internet has grown vastly since I graduated college in 2007. And it's really crazy to think that it has, in that amount of time, grown so much, but it really has. You could find wool in maybe one place. And so I found out about a show over in Chelsea, Michigan. It's a spinner's flock show. And I went over to it and saw women spinning. And I'd grown up with a spinning wheel in our house, but nobody ever touched it. It was just there for decoration. So I ended up calling and trying to sign up, and I was told it was full, and I was crushed. And I was asked, do you want to be on a waiting list? And I said, sure. And the day the class was supposed to start, I got a call, and would you still want to join? We've had a cancellation. And so I came and I learned how to spin. And these are the wheels at the KIA that we use. And these are the wheels that I now teach on. So another full circle kind of moment. Several years later, after spinning for a few years, and kind of like I learned the basics, but I wanted to make the weird yarn. So I was making the weird yarn, and I got to looking at the schedule, and I realized, oh, I could teach maybe an art yarn spinning class. That's what a lot of people were referring to these yarns as at the time. And it came about, and I was about 8 months pregnant at the time. And it came about that Susan, my spinning instructor, had actually had to stop teaching spinning. So I was able to actually just step into the role of the spinning instructor at the KIA, which has been delightful for the last, gosh, it's been since 2010. So about, is that right? No, that's not right. 2013. So it's been about 9 years since I started teaching there with that. I also, around the same time that I had learned how to spin, I learned how to use a piece of equipment called the drum carder, which is a way to blend fibers together. So I began to do that. And at the time, social media wasn't really much of a thing, but Etsy was starting to become a thing. And I started listing the fibers that I had dyed and was blending and creating on on there and found some success with that, and then eventually started finding fiber shows. But I had a little bit of an interruption. As I said, I was about 8 months pregnant when I interviewed to teach at the KIA in both the fiber department and the jewelry department. So a small little guy who is not so little anymore. And these were taken kind of earlier this summer in the spring. And it's been a challenge the last year or so, of course. But I'm fortunate that I am a teaching artist and that most everything that I do actually allowed me to be home with him and let him be virtual for a very long time. But after I had him, I was having a difficult time, doing a lot of the labor intensive work that I was doing with the dyeing and carding. So it got kind of put on hold a little bit. And I'd always wanted to make this wire core yarn. So it's why I wanted to learn how to spin in the first place. I wanted to make yarn that was flexible like this, that I could make jewelry with and kind of combine those two passions. I'd always tried to combine them, like my senior thesis exhibition, those pieces I showed you at the beginning, those were part of it. And then there was jewelry hanging on the walls as well. And it was kind of still disjointed at the time. It wasn't quite connecting. I feel like at Penland was when I really started connecting those two things a little more. And then it still took a while to really make everything work the way that I've been happy with it. So I figured out how to really make this wire core yarn and make it well and make it quickly. And then have been able to use it as a supply in my jewelry to make really unique things. So I've been kind of incorporating coiling techniques. I did learn some basket making techniques when I was in college as well. So being able to kind of revisit some of those ideas and bring them into my jewelry and make something really that I've never seen anyone else making anything quite like it. And putting that out there has been really great. Sorry, just 1 second. Frank. Sorry, my dog. So being able to create that though and do something like I do in my lab was really where that came in, so adapting because I was nursing my son, I was taking care of him. So to be able to have something that was small and then I could put on a tray and kind of like tote around while we were going about our day and being able to make all the time was really, really helpful. I went back to doing fiber shows. So kind of found that niche, I did try to do art fairs, like I said, for a while before, which was what led me to teaching at the Art Center Battle Creek because I was participating in their show. But I ended up finding that there were a lot more fiber shows than I ever thought there were. There's actually several here in Michigan. And so I was able to start selling my wares, in the state, out of the state, having a booth, but having it be really to that targeted audience of what I was looking for. And I was finding more and more that while I really enjoy making jewelry and I still do make jewelry all the time, what I was really enjoying was creating these fiber bats like you see over here, and even the yarn that you see, and like dyeing these supplies. So it's something I still kind of struggle with today, is that I do consider myself an artist, and that's something that I think is really hard for most artists to say about themselves. I am an artist, even though it's what we are. And it became a little bit more difficult even when I realized that I was making supplies essentially for other artists. But then it was like to really dig down and think about that, I was able to be creative, make something that I loved to make, and then be a part of someone else's process. So they were taking it and creating something completely new. I have felters that buy my work from me. Some local artists that you may have even seen their work in exhibitions at the KIA have used my fiber, and it's really cool to see what another artist's vision can do with what you're creating as a supply for them. And it's kind of like an accidental collaboration at that point. One thing that I had to figure out with my jewelry work was how to display it. And so I put on a different hat at this point and started to try to design my own displays for those. And I've always been really into vintage things. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is actually a vintage textile bobbin behind this. So then there's necklaces hanging off of that, like it's a necklace bar. And then there's kind of like a bust form here that is taking care, that is acting as a place for that to hang. Other collaboration began to happen. A close friend of mine that I had met because of fiber shows. Excuse me for just 1 second. Sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize. So collaboration began to happen, and a good friend of mine that I'd met because of fiber actually we began to share a booth together. And it was funny because her business name was Pumpkin House, and then my business name was Bricolage Studios. So we kind of would joke that we were Brick House. And on a particularly challenging day at a show, we were looking for a place to eat. And it turned out that this place called Brick House Cafe was right around the corner from where the show was happening. So it was kind of a fun serendipitous moment. And so it was nice to kind of have somebody be able to join me doing shows, and to be able to have someone that really got what I was doing to be able to work with them. In the meantime, I was also teaching at the KIA. So I was teaching spinning, but I began to start teaching how to blend too, because I found that that was where I was most excited about fibers, was the blending process, and then being able to work with that myself. So we're fortunate that we have a lot of equipment in the fiber studio to be able to do that and kind of accommodate those things. I also was teaching spinning over at Tillers International. Unfortunately, they do not really have a fiber program anymore there, but it was through there that I was able to meet more people and really start building a community in the area. The amount of spinners in the area at this point is actually pretty vast, and I feel pretty good about the fact that I taught a good portion of those people how to spin. And it was kind of a different crowd there. It was always really interesting because a lot of times people who knew about Tillers didn't know about the KIA and vice versa. So to be able to make somebody aware of another facility that has things that we do not have at the KIA was always really great, because, in craft and craftsmanship are things that would be lost if we didn't have places like this, or that could be lost if we didn't have places like this that are continuing to teach these kind of old world techniques, but bringing them into the modern age and showing, making them accessible to people as well. So I taught spindle spinning there as well. That was really fun. I was able to do a lot of things like that through Tillers and the KIA. I also started to learn to weave at the KIA, because, when you're in a room full of looms, when you're teaching, it kind of becomes a little bit too irresistible to want to try to learn how to do those things. So I started taking class down there myself. And at the time, I learned that Gretchen, who is the weaving instructor at the KIA, was looking for some people to share her studio with in the area. So I was able to, at that point, my business had been growing. I needed more space because I was kind of working out of my basement at the time and then dining in my kitchen, which is not the best thing to do. So I was able to join her at her studio and start to work out of the dye kitchen there, and have like a really nice big space to share with other artists, and also be able to work really freely without having to constantly put things away or feel like I was doing something kind of dangerous by having, dye powders out near where food also was being prepared in my home. So that was a really big deal, and felt like a really kind of a legitimization of being an artist as well, having this space outside the home. I started becoming a lot more intentional about what I was doing. I feel like with spinning and fibers, I was so excited about a lot of it that it's like I learned the basics and then I did what I wanted to with it, like that whole learn the rules before you can break them kind of thing. And I found myself wanting to really start to be better at those things. And it was really, I mean, I know social media has been around for a while, but it was really around the time I had my son that I started really realizing that it could be a tool to share and to promote my business, and also was seeing what other people were doing, and realizing that there was a big gap in the technical aspect of how to do things sometimes on there. And I think most people would agree that YouTube University is not the best place all the time to learn things. You can certainly figure out small things, but to just trust that somebody's doing things the right way and in a way that is going to be sound is not always the best. So I sort of started to make sure that I was not contributing to that, and was also making things that were unique and sharing things that were unique from me. So in that intention, this is more recent. This was just a few months back, but I began to try to mimic nature again. So really taking color inspiration and textural inspiration from natural objects and creatures and turning those into fiber bats. So in this case, all 9 of these were semi-precious stones I was trying to recreate. So I've at the KIA, I also learned lapidary skills. Jessica mentioned I'm the co-chair of the jewelry department, and we have lapidary equipment, so you can actually like polish your own stones and for setting and everything. And I've always been a rock hound since I was a kid, so it was only natural that kind of coming into those into a situation where I could work with those things again was really cool. So every one of these was based off of a semi-precious stone. There's like the bottom row is rainbow moonstone, and then we've got labradorite and sunstone. So those are all ones that have flash and things like that. So being able to take textures and colors and to sort of recreate those and have that iridescence to them. And these are all different types of jaspers that have lots of waves and lace and kind of looks to them. And then the top are ones that were kind of speckled and had different things going on with them. So it's really a fun challenge, and also just really exciting to work with those things. With the more intentional spinning, I was also teaching more intentional spinning. So we would do color studies and take a look at different fibers and things like that. So thinking about structure and what the actual fiber type would do was really became very fascinating to me. And even thinking about the stones and all of this, I want to remind you of that science background and the math background. So, I started getting into these things, with dyeing, there's a lot of chemistry to it, with, and also math, figuring out all those things. So, sometimes I feel like I'm very fortunate that I understood those things already and have been able to recognize that, a lot of kids, well, I'm never going to use this about math and science in school. And it's like, I use those things every day. I make my work, even though it is more of a craft that I'm doing. With that intention, I also, like on the right here, this is some yarn that I finished up during the pandemic, and I'm knitting myself a sweater out of my own hand spun finally. So really diving in and experimenting and doing all of the steps with something has become really important to me. I've had a great love affair with fleece and sheep, and I am just fascinated with the amount of breeds that there are and what their different fibers do and why one might be better for a pair of socks versus felting versus a sweater, you know, and all those different properties that they have. So someday I would like to have a farm, and the agricultural aspect of it is really interesting to me. I have been fortunate that I've made lots of friends that have sheep, so I get to go out to shearings and help with them and meet their sheep and know exactly where my fiber is coming from, and also help those farms get fleeces skirted, which is where, you know, after it comes off the sheep, we're actually pulling out parts that are pretty undesirable because, you know, maybe they have dung in them or urine or just a lot of, we call it vegetable matter in the biz, but, you know, straw and hay and things like that that get into it. And just assisting them in getting those things done, because it really takes a village to get a shearing done. And oftentimes you're asking other farms and just friends that know what they're doing for help to get those things done. It's a really an expensive thing to do. And you know, it's a hard business to be in, and it's really, because it's something I'm interested in, I feel like the value that I get from learning while I'm there is worth my time, because I would not be able to obtain it otherwise. We've been able to host some workshops at our studio, which has been a really fun thing. You know, sometimes equipment restrictions and just having a variety of spaces to work in has been really great and build community into. So that's been a really good time, bringing in artists as well and supporting other artists that have been very supportive of me and what I do. I've also been able to travel to teach, which has been really exciting. I have went to New York and Maryland and Kansas and Wisconsin, and I hope to go to lots of other places, Chicago area as well. So to be able to travel to places that I may not have otherwise been able to travel to because somebody wants me to teach is just an absolute dream, really, because I have been able to meet so many great people. And it's really a lot of the travel has been why virtual teaching has worked out so well during the pandemic. More recent work has been some, I've been doing a lot more jewelry work in the last couple of years. I've really kind of returned to that. And that's been really exciting. But the fiber aspect of it is still there because that's where I live and things. So these are some copper pins that I made that are all sheepies that I then powder coated, which is something that I've also learned in the time that I've been teaching at the KIA. So there's been a lot of like really nice learning experience that I've also been able to gain being a part of the community at the KIA and an instructor there. I also have been able to design some tools for fiber processing or for knitting. You know, I've got some stitch markers over here that I made that are really lovely to work with when you're knitting, but I designed these after learning how to create my own die and create multiples of something, and then was able to do the powder coating on them as well. So just being able to take kind of a concept and build it from scratch, find a way to make it and make it better and faster through that design process is like, that's an incredible thing. And to not have to outsource something because you have the wherewithal to do it without doing that, and to create meal multiples in an easy way. I also learned how to cast. It was one of the few gaps in my metalsmithing journey at college that I just did not get. So I've been practicing that and learning how to do lost wax casting at the KIA as well. These are all silk moths that I did, but so this is some more recent work that I've been doing with stone settings and with some of my cast work. I think it's kind of fun to be able to see all those little elements prior to the finished product as well. You know, and like, these are all, actually all three of these photos are ones that I have shared on Instagram, and being able to kind of tell a story as I've gone and be able to connect with people a little bit more because I'm telling a story through that. You know, as an artist, if you want people to see you, you kind of have to wear all those hats. You have to be able to come up with promotion. You have to be able to tell a story to have people actually relate and be able to connect with you on that level. And you have to create compelling images. You have to be a pretty good photographer, even if photography was not what you ever focused on. So kind of grappling with all of that and bringing all of that together has been something that has certainly evolved over time. I revisited that old work, those geodes from before. On the left here, you can see this is the felt part of it just after it's been cut, and then I encrusted it this time with actual stones. So I took different kinds of quartz. There's rutilated quartz, which has like the gold flecks in it. There's tourmalated quartz, which has kind of the black flecks in it. And then there was just some regular quartz beads. And I just encrusted the entire insides of these like this to create that. And this was in the faculty review right before shutdown happened at the KIA, from, I guess it was December of 2019 to early into 2020. That exhibition was up. So it's been kind of nice to start to create sculpture again and create that work. And actually this past summer, I was really excited to be able to share some of this with the teens, the teen camps. I taught them how to felt their own geodes. I mostly teach adults, so it's always kind of fun to jump in and have a completely different crowd of people, you know, a different age group in there, and to see what they will do with something. You know, you can show somebody how to do something exactly how you do it, and seeing what they do with it and how they are creative with it is really rewarding. I've also been fortunate to be published several times in the last few years in both Ply Magazine and Spin-Off Magazine. And actually through through Spin-Off, I was able to do a video class, which I filmed in, we don't film things anymore, do we? I recorded with them in January of 2020. And it really was one of the things that helped get me through, especially the very beginning of the pandemic, because it actually went live right at the beginning. And that was when I was able to be paid for this large project. So working toward all of these things and working in my field for so long and just keeping at it, and, you know, realizing I needed to teach to get through, and realizing how much I love teaching actually, and then traveling to do so and finding local avenues to teach, led me to the experience I needed to be able to start being published and having that extra stream of revenue coming in every so often, contracted. We did find out in January 2020 as well that our studio building was being torn down and we had to move. And we were supposed to be out March 30th. And we all know that, because this is the part of the presentation where we start talking about the pandemic more, because this is where I've probably adapted the most in my life as an artist. But we were told we needed to move, and we got a little bit of an extra time, but we were able to move in on Memorial Day weekend of 2020 to our new space. And it was difficult, but I am so grateful that I have this space still. I'm still sharing with Gretchen, and we also share with a local dyer named Rita, who died. Her business is Yarn Hollow, and she does really lovely things as well. So we have this kind of cozy area that we share, and having to move during that felt impossible. And once we were there, it felt so much better. And it's become a real safe haven to get to and to continue to work. I did finally get a loom of my own, and I did not set it up until we had this studio space. So I've been able to start playing with some of my hand spun and creating those things. And in doing that, I've been sharing a lot of that. And it's always really interesting to me when I share like a little clip video or anything, because those are the ones that people seem to really love. If I show, 5 seconds of me winding one of these, added on to something else. But I have then kind of created virtual classrooms since then, and I have been teaching from both the space I'm sitting in currently, which is what you see on the right hand side here. I've been teaching spinning out of here, and then teaching from my jewelry bench back here throughout the pandemic, through the KIA and on my own, and through guilds, and everybody adapted really quickly and really allowed anybody who wanted to adapt to teaching online to be able to teach online. And I'd never even heard of Zoom. I was talking with Jessica right before the presentation about that I'd not even heard of it. And in the course of learning it, I also learned several other programs, like OBS, which is something that most like gamers, if you've got kids or grandkids that are into watching YouTube videos of famous video game people on YouTube, that's what they use typically to have themselves be in the little corner while their video games over here and showing the gameplay and everything. And so there were a lot of those things that were already in place for other sharing that artists actually were able to adapt to using for their own purposes with teaching and demonstrating and sharing their work with people. So that's been really cool, and hurts my brain in a different way than anything else I've worked on in a long time, because it's been so different. And as far as teaching online, I just finished up a couple jewelry classes that were virtual this past summer. And it's been really fun to kind of design pieces as I go with my students and have that full amount of time to really demonstrate and show them. Sometimes when we're in the studio, actually, we're not able to go as in depth with things and show these things, because when our students are in the studio, they want to use the studio. So when you are demonstrating for a prolonged period of time, I know I often feel pressure to wrap it up as quickly as possible and just kind of show a little bit at a time each class, so that they can kind of assemble everything and then have a lot of class time. But in this case, I was able to sometimes kind of like, I sketched this live with my class, trying to figure out how I wanted this piece to get put together. And in another class, I was teaching an etching class and a tab class. So it was kind of fun because I etched a background for this. I etched these little bees. And then I was able to, in the tab class, I was teaching incorporate tabs into the same piece to kind of bring everything together. I have a little video actually of, oops, and I already had it open. I had this video, and I have it kind of sped up. I just figured I'd play it for a second while I talked. We were doing a lot of live demonstration, but sometimes I don't have the ability to solder at home. So I was able to go into the jewelry studio and kind of pre-record things for my students and kind of show them, this is how I would solder these pieces together and bring all of these elements together for them. So to be able to adapt and kind of combine all of these multimedia elements and bring that all together to provide a really good classroom experience for my students still has been really incredible. But you kind of got to figure out how to be a videographer at the same time. So it's like, what do we have now? Social media expert, videographer, photographer. And then eventually, things started to get to a point where editing became necessary. But to show you that piece basically finished, that it's not quite finished in this picture. It's kind of a sneaky photo that I took, but just so that you can see kind of how everything came together. But editing became a thing. And another thing that was born out of this is I was feeling very lonely, as I think most people did. And this is a good friend of mine that I met at fiber shows several years ago. And we were finally able to be together again earlier this year at a few different shows. But we started a podcast because you can podcast without being with each other. And so we started doing that, not just to spread the word about fiber arts and local fiber and sustainability, but also as a way to support some of these artists and businesses that maybe had taken a hit during this. So to be able to spread the word about them a little bit more and talk about it. So this is our podcast, Fiber Variety Hour. There's some other elements that will happen with it. We're still really early, but we've got, I think we have 8 or 9 episodes out now. So it's kind of, we talk to mills and farms and dyers and all kinds of people. So, but through that, I started editing audio. And I hadn't really done a lot of editing. The last time I'd done any kind of editing was when I was in college. And it was frustrating and difficult and also very rewarding when I figured it out. And so that actually led me to be able to start doing some video editing, including doing some work for the KIA. We did our open house this year virtually. Every other year, the KIA, the Human Arts School, will do a school open house, and then on the off year they do hands-on. And we had done hands-on, I think, like the last week before everything shut down. And we had the discussion that we would have our open house virtually. So what we did is we kind of cut together all these little sort of informational bits about each and every department. And I'll go ahead and play this, but I'll have it on mute if it'll play. No. There it is. I'm like, where can I mute it? Because you don't need to hear me twice. But I was able to edit this together and do a voiceover for it. And had I not had that experience already with the audio editing that I had been doing, I wouldn't have been able to put this together. And I feel like overall, the school just did a phenomenal job. Everybody really pulled together to be able to put something really special together for that virtual open house. This actually is Paige, who was my jewelry resident this past year in the jewelry department, but she was very good at weaving and ended up weaving most of the term and having a piece. But you know, that adaptation and doing something really different, and like a lot of this content I had because I was always taking pictures and always taking video to be able to help promote things. So to be able to pull from this wealth of media and create something that helped promote the school and all of our students and our teaching artists that are at the KIA was really kind of an incredible thing to participate in. This here was one of our fiber residents that you just saw for a moment there. And this is Martha, who teaches our classes. So I'm not gonna do that whole thing, but yeah, so you can view these just about everywhere, or on our Facebook page. Some of these things are there with the whole voiceover thing, but trying to get past that. So the video editing, though, also turned into figuring out what people were looking at and where people were looking at things and how things change with social media all the time. And I finally caved recently and joined TikTok, which has really good editing tools in it. And it's kind of amazing that some of these apps that, you know, like you look at these short videos and you think, oh, that was cool. And it's like 30 seconds of content. And I'm realizing now that sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 days to put together everything that I need for those 2 or 3 minutes of content. This was just like a little time lapse that I did showing how I cut out one of these moths and doing these kind of silk moth studies. So again, going back to that fiber and metal together, but sharing what I'm doing, because sometimes, and not even sometimes, almost every time I have shared something like this, what I've realized is people don't realize just how much work and effort goes into some of these things. And earlier in the presentation, you're about to see the cast piece of a moth that I had in wax. So that's one of the wax things that I had earlier. So even putting together something like that, and just to be seen and to help people understand how much work and craftsmanship goes into every little thing that we have. Oops. Okay. So I did pretty good. I hope to end with about 10 minutes for questions. So if anybody has any, I would love to take them right now. I just wanted to wrap up with the fact that, it's been a really difficult year and a half, and I do feel really lucky that I was able to adapt and do those things. And I think a lot of artists really struggled with it. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. I've talked for too long now. So
Emily, thank you so much. And what I want to say is, if you ever teach that geode class for adults, I want to be there. But I really loved that statement you made that, without places like the Kirkman Art School and other schools like that, that we would just lose craft, or that it could be lost. I think that was a really, a wonderful way to say it, because we do have something really special in that, I think people don't think about, I could learn to weave, or I could learn how to card wool or anything like that. And there is a place, here in town and around where you can learn skills like that, which is really cool.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that I know that the entire time I've taught, especially at the KIA, that our community really needs us. I can't tell you how many times I've had a student come in and you can tell they are just a ball of stress from their workday. And within 10 minutes, you just see this like calm come over them, and they're just happy to go pound on some metal or spin some yarn or whatever. And I think the importance of that creative outlet that is outside of what your day-to-day might be is really, really important. And I've been really grateful and fortunate to be a part of that and to help provide that for people. So
we have a comment from Christina. Amazing. So much interesting information. You are so talented, and thank you.
Oh, thanks.
And I really agree with that. It was really wonderful to see all of your work. So everyone, this is the time that if you have got a question or a comment, you can either unmute yourself to ask if that's how you would prefer to do so, or you can type your question into the chat, and either I or Emily will read it out loud. And of course, Emily would answer it because she's the expert. So.
This is the crickets part where I always feel like I have to talk because I get nervous.
Well, they could, there's always, people might need time to type. And one thing that I remember in one of my workshops that I did this past year was, let's learn to live with silence, because when things are silent, people are thinking about things, or, but
that's a very good point.
Yeah. But I mean, I've really enjoyed this. I think we might potentially have similar backgrounds. My mother was a seamstress, and so I always grew up with things like this around my house as well. And just really loved seeing how inventive you have been over the course of your career, and all the amazing things you've made, and the wool with wire wrapped wool. That was very amazing.
Yeah, and I do that on my spinning wheel, so it's kind of cool that like everything kind of comes together. But
yeah, and I think it's cool because you said that makes it flexible, and people don't tend to think about things like wool or paper or other things like that as being able to have a sculptural element. So we had another comment from Caroline. So talented, amazing presentation. Thank you for sharing. It's so cool how you're constantly continuing to learn. And Denise asks if she can say something. So yes.
Of course.
Emily, what a wonderful presentation. And I would like to say that you are an example of a true artist, where you are artistic in all aspects of your life, as Jessica said, innovation, your creativity to change and adapt during the COVID, not only for your personal studio, but for the KIA, and the ability that you have to not just stay in one material or one medium, but to expand, and your curiosity has led you to a lot of beautiful work, and a great job, Emily. We're proud to have you on our faculty.
Oh, thank you, Denise, and thanks for being here today. I really appreciate your words.
That was so nice to hear. I can see that it is about 1 o'clock. So if our audience members don't have any questions, I want to say thank you so much to them for joining us today. And thank you so very much to you, Emily, for your time and your expertise and sharing your story with us. Really amazing to hear, really, really amazing work to see. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us at ArtBreak Online. I will say that our next ArtBreak is in person. So if you are still with us and if you are in the Kalamazoo area, please come and join us in the building to learn about local sustainability. And also, if you're interested, you can take a class with Emily. So registration is open. And everyone have a really wonderful Tuesday.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.